I'm always angry. Hey, what's up? It's Wednesday, it's SJU, and we feel filthy.
Filthy.
Just
my.
dirty.
Disgusting.
That's a way to open a show. I'm Joe, Danielle, Eric, Eduardo.
Hello.
Can I call you that?
It's okay.
I won't do
Ralph
it.
called him Ned on Monday's show.
What'd she call you?
Yeah, on Monday she called me Ned.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a good enough wig to be Ned.
I don't like how I started this show. Well, let's jump into it. Hey guys, we're on the road to Comic-Con right now. So we're all in cars and not really in this studio, but we wanted to leave you with something today. So we're getting into some fan questions. And if you want your fan questions answered, we've got a community tab on the YouTube channel. So jump into that. There's always a post looking for questions. Post them there. You guys post a lot of really great stuff that in turn hopefully provides some good shows. So let's jump into the first one. This is from Shane Eisen. He asks, what movies would you consider untouchable? These are the ones that should never get messed with. They should never get remade. They should never get rebooted. What are the perfect untouchable movies?
I mean, I'll go with, and it's one of the ones I think was on their list, and because it's an obvious one, but the first one I said when you asked me this question earlier was Back to the Future. Just to me, it is. I'm the millionth person to say this, but it's like such a perfectly constructed movie. You know, it's like everything is like the story is so well constructed, the stakes are so well constructed. You love the characters, love the performances, which is of course amazing because the behind the scenes stuff of Eric Stoltz being replaced several weeks into filming, where they're like, oh no, actually Michael J. Fox is the perfect person. He has to do this, and he was. So everything about that movie, to me, it makes it kind of untouchable because I don't think you could recapture all of the magic that came together to make that movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, everything about it is just so zeitgeisty of like its time.
Yeah.
And sure. Ed?
Well, I feel like I'm representing myself as well as Dan Murrell today by saying Jaws. I am one of those Philistines that a few months ago said that personally, if the shark from The Shallows showed up in Jaws, I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind if there was a cut that people like me could see.
The Shallows cut.
And then I got super stabbed up on the internet, and I learned the error of my ways. It was the only time it's ever worked. Don't ever try it again. But, but that time it actually did work because I started to realize that not only, it isn't just about the paper mache shark that they're soundly defeating. It's about the dread. And that's also about the performances of each and every actor in that whole movie. You could not, no matter how good you got the shark or the sea or the this or that, no matter how much you improve that part of it, when Hooper's in the water, or when Brody is looking at that water with all that dread, I don't think there's anybody else that can do that. I don't think there's anybody else that could play Quint ever. Tom Hardy as Quint. Tom Hardy in his day. Playing Quint.
Maybe,
it doesn't hit it though. That guy was really in it. You know what I mean? He was really in World War II. You know what I mean?
You could actually feel the salt. Yeah. Coming off his lips.
Dude, you could feel the salt.
Lips. Yeah.
You start to feel gritty. Like, you need to take a beach shower when you watch that movie. I don't think anything could approach it.
Yeah. No, I wonder too, and we'll sort of after we'll talk a little bit about our choices, and then we'll back out a little bit and kind of talk about like, well, why? You know, what goes into the idea of an untouchable movie. But I do wonder with Jaws. My initial thought is like, we've gotten so trained now as to what a horror movie is supposed to be and what special effects are supposed to look like. Would people watch Jaws today and kind of go, "Where's the shark? This is boring." Like, or I don't know. Like,
I have mentioned this before. I don't know why, because it's one of my favorite tidbits of information. In the Deep Blue Sea commentary track, the director of Deep Blue Sea says, I always loved Jaws. I wanted to make my own Jaws. But the thing about Jaws is you couldn't see the shark. In my movie, you're going to see the shark.
And there'll be smart sharks.
How we did. Oh, how we saw those smart sharks.
And so, and that was probably 20 years ago or whatever. But I do think that nowadays people might insist that they've got to see that shark. They wanted to see the Meg. They wanted to see, the deepest, bluest hat like a shark's fin. Like they want,
Such a good song.
It's amazing. Prime. Man, we need more raps that are about the movie that the actor is in.
Absolutely.
Right?
Bring that back. That's
What's
something
up, y'all? We're about to crawl. Yeah.
I do think we're gonna do an end of year supercut where of moments where SJU just there was like a long thoughtful pause, and then one of us very sadly was like, there need to be more songs. So I just feel like it's on our mind a lot.
We just did all
important.
those Runs of Honest trailers with Will Smith, and so
Yeah,
it's like
it's
Yeah.
fresh.
it's like right here in the front of our brains.
yeah, it's
Zeitgeist.
Fresh Prince right now.
Your personal zeitgeist.
My personal zeitgeist.
Daniel, what's your untouchable?
My untouchable is, and I don't know why anybody would do this anyway, but my untouchable is Almost Famous. It's it's just a very sweet story about a bunch of underage kids getting banged up by just a bunch of two old dudes, and it's based on Cameron Crowe's actual real life. And yeah, I just don't think that's another one where it's the chemistry and it's the people. And honestly, I don't know how that didn't set off everybody's problematic alarms back then, but definitely would now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, it's definitely never a movie that's like, this is all good things.
yeah,
Where-
no, and the movie itself knows that.
Yeah,
people are
you
trash.
guys got into Bond on Monday, and like the thing with Bond is that they always go back to being like, thumbs up, James Bond, like you're nailing it. But like,
You're so cool.
I think that's the difference between like, this is a little gross feeling and the gross feelingness of like an Almost Famous,
Yeah.
where it's like Almost Famous knows that this is not
Yeah, it knows
like
it's
a
great.
good story. This is a kid who's like caught up in just all this
Yeah.
nastiness and just doing his best.
And I'd say it almost is like, it's like part like, come on, go on the road with us. It's a circus. It's fun. And then also it's almost like cult-like because it's like, with the groupies, the Band-Aids. It's really interesting. And Cameron Crowe's life is so fascinating to me. Like, 'cause Fast Times is one of my all-time favorite movies. And the more I read about him, and it's like, wait, what? He was 14 and he was touring with Led Zeppelin. And then he really went undercover in a high school to research Fast Times. It's like, this is actually really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously that movie is deeply personal, and it's definitely not. It shows you why it would be appealing if you were a teenager to like go on the road with this famous band.
Yeah.
Which I think everyone sees on the surface, but then it's like, what would it really be like?
Yeah, exactly. There's those
Grody.
there's those levels of like brokenness in everyone that like he doesn't necessarily have the faculties to see yet.
Yeah.
Where everyone is like, hey man, join the circus. Let's go. Let's party. It's all good.
Right,
and like,
right.
It's really important that movies don't always, in every single instance, try to be the aspirant version of humanity. Like, that movie could have been really lame if, like, all the Band-Aids were all 35-year-old ladies, totally age-appropriate. I'm a 35-year-old lady here to have consensual sex under no influence of drugs with all of these 45-year-old rock stars. Yes, I am. That sucks, and it's boring, and it's not real.
I like that dialogue. Why, yes, I am.
That first draft was really bad.
Verily, I say, I am here to have sex. Thor
Yeah.
comes to have sex with these guys. I'm just saying,
It's intensive story, right?
it's one of these things where and on Monday we did talk about how
Spoiler
Bond.
alert, Monday was 15 minutes ago.
I'm wearing literally the same dress. Literally wearing. I
took
didn't
off
get
my
up.
hoodie to change it up.
I switched out with Roth, and Macho Man got put on the table.
I didn't.
Macho
Yeah.
Man appeared magically.
I was keeping up the kayfabe, Daddy. Now what you guys doing? You're going off script.
This is a
You're
table
going
that
off.
appreciates you using that term.
You're going off script, Daddy. I was here. I changed my shirt.
I'm sorry, Dusty. I'm sorry, Dusty.
Rest in peace. Rest in peace,
dream.
Eagle Dust.
The dream here has got something to say.
No, I'm with you. I think there's a difference between something like an Almost Famous and like The Dirt, which I feel like The Dirt was a little like. I mean, yeah, they tried to be like. These activities were hard on their bodies, but also that movie was like, put Motley Crue, right?
Oh yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah,
He's steering it with his what? Anyway.
Yeah. Verily.
Verily.
Verily. I was gonna go with Big Trouble in Little China.
Wow.
And
I like it.
That's a nice pull, especially for you, Burton.
Yeah.
all the reflexes.
Well, my reflex when they were like, we're going to redo this with The Rock, was I was like, there is no way, especially just the way like modern blockbusters feel now. Like, look at the new Men in Black versus the original Men in Black. Like, everything is just... Here's an action sequence and a line that is meant to be humorous, and
Right.
Everything is lit the same and feels the same. And I don't think there's no way that you do anything that approaches this movie again, because I think it would just be like they would miss the point. Like that
It's
it's, like,
so
the
wonderfully
Rock's gonna
weird.
fight a wizard underground. Okay,
Yeah.
go. And it's like, no, that's not what it is exactly, because that's what they were supposed to make to begin
Yeah.
with. Like, the studio thought John Carpenter and Kurt Russell were going to make them a big action blockbuster, and they were on a soundstage that made to look like a small Chinatown alley, hitting 3 storms with a truck, and just being like, "Yeah, we're going to deliver this huge
Also-
blockbuster."
Another great movie where someone involved with the movie raps about the plot of the movie.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I'm not going to call that singing. That was rapping.
Big trouble.
China! China!
Dude, no, okay, but
Oh, you gotta run.
that was like the rapping Duke came out with a pop song, a pop synth song.
So miss theme songs
Yep.
from movies. Oh man.
Yep.
So miss them.
But I
Remember
I
the
do
Citizens
think-
on Patrol rap from Police Academy 4?
Oh,
Good stuff.
Oh Lord.
Patrol!
But I do think it was Carpenter making fun of 2 things.
Yeah.
It was him making fun of like the Clint Eastwood,
Yes.
and also I think it was a reaction to like how overboard Americans went with like, we're obsessed with ninjas and
Yeah.
General Tso's chicken and all things
But
Asian.
that's,
now,
that's what I was gonna say. Right at that moment, people like us, the screen junkies of that day, were like, "Yeah, man, this trope of white dudes doing Asian stuff better than Asians, like at all times, is kind of annoying and weird and dumb and totally unmotivated and looks stupid." And then this movie goes, "You're right.
Yes.
check it
Yeah,
out."
yeah.
And I loved this movie for that exact
Yeah.
reason. And like you said, it can't be remade because John Carpenter at that moment in time doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Just like all those
Yeah.
actors and all those everything. But
He's
like,
writing a Joker comic now.
Yeah.
That feels weird.
Hey, you
I mean,
know-
I'm gonna read it. That
Look, eventually we're all going to write a Joker comic, right? Like, that's just how it works.
That is what fate has set in store.
It's our 15 minutes of fame, except with just 15 pages of Joker. Like, everyone
Everyone
one.
gets to write a Joker comic.
all it takes is one bad panel.
the janitor who smiles.
So let's step back and sort of like look at this idea of untouchable, because I feel like we all named 4 different movies that are very untouchable for very different reasons. So let's start with Back to the Future, like, because this is a movie where, I mean, just everything about it is so specific. I don't know how you recapture
Yeah.
any of that magic.
I mean, actually, when we were talking about Big Trouble in Little China, I did think about the one sort of surface similarities there are just like blending of genres, like,
Right.
you know, it's like comedy and sci-fi, and then just, even though I think Big Trouble in Little China is probably more outwardly weird, there's also weird stuff in Back to the Future too, and I mean, and it's easy
Yeah.
to joke about now, but the whole incest storyline and stuff that just, you even feel like today there'd be like a lot more studio notes about like, are we really doing this whole mom trying to bang the son thing? You know, maybe we
Like,
scale
yeah.
back from that. And they're like, no, yeah. And this was a time where, you know, Spielberg, I mean, it's not like Spielberg still doesn't have all this power, but certainly at that moment, it was like sort of the apex of anything he wanted to do, he could get done. And, you know, he really ran interference for a lot of the directors who did movies with him. And so, yeah, it's just like, everything got done that they wanted to get done. They had this crazy recasting, which, and I always think about how if Back to the Future were being made today, all the articles about what a disaster it must be. They're
Yeah.
replacing the actor 6 weeks into production.
Oh my
This
God.
movie's doomed.
Yeah.
Like there must be, everything must be wrong with the sitcom guy. Yeah. So it just felt like that alchemy, the blending of genres in a time where it felt like that just really, there was a lot of interesting sort of mashups happening like that. And people that might not, you know, I think because Back to the Future was such a like 4-quadrant hit, and people that might not usually want to go see a time travel movie or a movie set in the 50s or all these different things,
Right.
it's like, no, but all together, it just worked right. And it was for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone watched it and was into it.
It's a sneaky way to like trick people into watching sci-fi that would not ordinarily. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of people don't even really acknowledge that it's a sci-fi. It's,
Right,
it's just
right.
like a comedy about a guy who goes back in time through like a special time machine. But it is. They just tricked you.
Right,
They tricked
right.
you into being a nerd along with the rest of us.
Right. I mean, even though, yeah, and they got like sort of super geeky about, especially Back to the Future 2, which I think is like a lot of people's introduction to like split timelines and all that stuff. But it's like even that first movie, by having it be like, yes, it was like movie made up science, but it's still like by having it be like a scientist who did this, and the flux capacitor, which could be anything, but it's like presented as something important that we invented.
Yep.
Yeah, it just and even the the DeLorean, which has obviously become so iconic. It was like all those elements, which of course like they could have zigged and zagged at a million different points, but they didn't. This is the movie they made, and it's just hard to see like if you try to remake it now, of course you would be like, well, we have to use the DeLorean again and all these different things, but you wouldn't be able to recapture that.
And I think something you said too that struck me was like it was a movie that landed for everyone, but it wasn't made for everyone.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like they made the movie they wanted to make, and as a result, like the mass appeal, I feel like came as a result of that, not the other way around.
And I think didn't they say like their sort of inciting idea for that movie was like looking through a yearbook and seeing your parents when they're kids and that kind of weird out of body experience you have of being like, oh yeah, that's my parent, especially when you were a teenager, being like, oh, that's them at my age. That's weird, and you can't really picture what it would be like for them. And well, what if you could actually like coexist in their high school with them, and one of them was trying to have sex with you? So but I think that is one other thing that made it a great movie was taking like that idea and then building around it this whole world and this sci-fi trappings to it, and who the characters were that it all came together.
Well, it's also one of those screenplays where it's a perfect screenplay, full stop. Yeah. When people study screenplays, they should study that screenplay because it's really one of those things where that guy, Michael J. Fox's character, Marty McFly, he saved not only his life and his future and his existence, but he improved his parents' lives and existence and in future by meddling with the time stream. I mean, he's the original Captain America. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm not going back to this whack ass regular world, bro. I'm gonna do some little tailoring, baby. And he did it.
My dad.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish that was the name of the movie.
To the future.
Decuck my dad. Starring Michael J. Fox.
Oh my God. But yeah, again,
it's worse. Your parents, they become cocks. Oh no. We lost it there for a second, guys.
So I wanted to run through some of these because this is the ultimate in internet reporting. We are a panel show that is about to comment on an article BuzzFeed put out, which was commenting on a Reddit thread list.
We have gone through the looking glass.
It's the official information Ouroboros.
Yes, but I thought it fit because users were discussing what they felt were perfect, like untouchable movies, and so I thought some of these surprised me on the list. Some of them were movies that we put on our list. Catch Me If You Can is one they popped on. Catch Me doesn't strike me as like a timeless like don't touch this anymore movie.
Yeah,
because
I really like that movie, but I don't hold it. It's not like top level.
I think there might be an age thing.
Maybe.
Right, I hate to admit it, but like that movie for a lot of people who were in middle school when I was definitely not, saw that movie as like, ooh, this is grown up DiCaprio, and he's doing this Oscar bait. It's good to me. This is my first big boy movie, and they put it on the list as like, wow, this blew my mind.
I mean, it's good, I don't
good, but it's mid-grade Spielberg, and Spielberg is like plutonium. A little bit will kill you. It's great. It's very powerful.
I get,
but mid-grade.
I think there's a difference between like untouchable, and this is why I added the list to this question, because I think there's a difference between like this is perfect and this is untouchable, because all of the movies we named, like there's stuff you can fix and tweak, but
also maybe the difference between untouchable as in perfect and great as it can be as a human endeavor, and unremakeable as in you could never remake it, because some of these movies are definitely you could do them over again.
Sure,
you could do The Godfather over again, but could you remake it?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Blues Brothers is on here.
Lord knows they've tried.
Yeah. Oh, Blues Brothers 2000. Good Lord. I don't know if you could do this one again. I don't know why you'd want to. It would be like having two other people do Wayne and Garth.
Yeah. It's like so tied to. Again, I mean, they tried to do a sequel without one of them, and didn't go so hot.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, that was not an untalented cast that went in with the best intentions to do 2000.
But one of these is interesting though. They have on here The Truman Show, and I think like one I think that was a movie when I was coming into my own. That was one of those first like reality TV we're going to talk about this type of thing. But I think the reason why it couldn't be done right now, not because of any just major. Peter Weir is a great director and everything, but it's not some. But I don't think people would accept it as I don't think people would accept the horror of always being on TV.
Look how lucky he is.
They're like, oh, look at how many followers he has, dog.
Yeah.
That's what everybody's reaction, these
That's
kids' reaction would be.
horrible.
And that's like, he's not even horrific
Why is he so
anymore.
upset?
Yeah, why is he so upset? He's got his own show.
He trends every
Everyone's
Thursday.
following whatever he does.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, Gucci. Oh,
Gucci.
God.
Like and
love it.
subscribe.
Yeah, Back to the Future's on here. Alien, Die Hard. I mean, Die Hard has been remade many times.
Right.
Yeah.
Has
Die
different
Hard has
things.
got to be one of the most ripped off movies as far as like
Yeah.
the basic. I mean, it was such a running joke in the 90s. It's Die Hard on a blank.
Yes,
and
exactly.
We got 'em all.
Exactly. The Prestige was on this list, which I liked actually because I think it's of the Nolan movies, it's probably my favorite. I don't think it gets quite enough love.
You know, I
pretty cool
think,
movie.
yeah, that period.
I'm sorry, I'm looking right at you, Ed.
No, that period
Didn't
of
get enough
Nolan.
love, Ed.
Ed, talk shit
saw
about
you
Christopher
tweeted.
Nolan.
No, but you know, me and Christopher Nolan have a sordid history, like
Sure.
like to eternal vampires or something. But I feel as though that level of Nolan doesn't exist anymore, much like Memento Nolan doesn't exist anymore. So you're right, that would be tremendously hard to remake, especially that level of. Jackman and the other one, Bale, right? Weren't they in that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that level of them, that age of them is gone. It's like there's something gone there. But to me, Stand By Me is the biggest one on here that could never be remade because those kids and the way that they were being and the distance we had from the 50s. We won't never have that exact amount of distance from the 50s again, if you get what I'm saying. Like, we're so much farther away from the 50s, it seems, than we were at that time.
Yeah.
To be able to embrace the reality of all that, the kid acting.
That was also that amazing era for Rob Reiner where he made like 5 or 6 great movies in a row that were completely different genres.
No,
was like,
he was in his stride. He was in his stride.
Yeah.
Well, and they're because I feel like we're further removed from the 80s now than we were in the 80s when we saw Stand By Me to the 50s. And even watching people's reactions to Stranger Things where they're like, those kids are just everywhere. And it's like, yeah.
That's what we were doing. Yeah.
And it was worse in the 50s.
When we were doing the review, I was like, that it is true that my mom was a streetlights person, but as soon as she went to sleep, I got up on the roof and just did all kind of stuff. There wasn't all these tracking devices. There wasn't any.
Yeah.
I mean, I was definitely riding my bicycle around the valley with no one knowing where I was or what I was doing. Like,
Yeah,
for hours at a time.
We had all bought.
No way to reach me.
Quick story about how tight I am. We had all bought the ninja suits out of the back of the martial arts catalog,
Amazing, yes.
So we all had them, and we all just played hide and seek at night, like in the neighborhood. Like, can you imagine today? You walk into your garage and there's just 2 ninjas crouched in a corner because we were just all up in strangers' houses. And I should be dead.
Oh, yeah.
You should be dead.
I should absolutely. In Kentucky,
Yeah.
everybody was armed. Everybody was armed, and I'm running. Yeah,
But that's got to be the best 80s, early 90s redneck way to die. It's like, man. They got a ninja accident too.
That's a Florida way to die.
Kid was dressed like a
Ninja hunting
ninja.
accident.
Ninja
You died in a ninja hunting
How'd
accident.
your boy go? Dressed as a ninja. It was bad, man. It was real bad.
That boy never learned how to throw a shuriken right.
That throwing star wasn't real.
Never will.
It was paper mache.
Throwing star.
Hey guys, do you like ninja content? Make sure that you are subscribed to Fandom Entertainment, our morning show SJU, which is this show is on every morning at 11. We've got a lot of other really cool stuff that comes on here as well. Friday night we are at San Diego Comic-Con, July 19th. Our panel is at 8:30 to 10 p.m. We're closing out the night. I love our current graphic design department. I just like the look of everything that Fandom is putting out for us right now. I honestly do. We've got a great show. We're doing a movie fight. We've got a great cast lined up for you guys. We're going to keep it a little
surprises.
under the hat. Yeah, we got some fun surprises. is we're showing you some cool footage of stuff we've got coming, because I know that like we keep saying like lots of cool stuff coming, and then we keep like not immediately handing it to you.
We're jerks.
Here's the thing. Well, here's the thing
Lucy
about
with that
cool
football.
stuff is that it takes a minute.
Yeah.
But we've got some cool footage to show you guys. We're gonna be premiering an Honest trailer, which I'm really excited about. This one, yeah, it's gonna be a great show. Please come out and join us. Go ahead and accept defeat that you're not going to get into the Marvel Hall H panel, and just come directly to us and just hang out,
embrace
have a
failure,
good time.
guys.
Yeah, embrace failure. We have Screen Junkies.
We are your defeat.
All your defeat are
So we'll
belong
see
to
you
us.
guys there.
Yes.
Let's we sort of tied all these fan questions that are kind of about like perfect movies and sort of film club feeling questions and stuff like that. So Julia Silva asked, I just started a film club with my friends, which is very cool, by the way. What are some out-of-the-box movies we could watch? As a reference, they've been watching a lot of Kurosawa. They watch Inside Llewyn Davis, Taxi Driver, Primer, Old
this.
Boy.
Nice.
So I'll kick this one off. I'm going for a Western two-parter, and not necessarily out of the box, but I think they're fun to compare and contrast. And I think you should watch Tombstone, which is not quite Young Guns 2 level ridiculous shoot 'em up.
Very close.
And
But-
lacking in a Bon Jovi song.
Right, exactly, but also not like prestige Western.
Right.
So I would say Tombstone, and then I would pair. I love this movie so much. Look at that. Look at those.
Look at them
those handsome
tombstoning. Look at all
boys.
those stashes.
You know
man.
they are so sweaty.
Look at all those huckleberries. Yes, they are. Those are some very sweaty men in Arizona.
Stash of glory.
But I would pair that with Open Range with Kevin Costner, which is another sort of not modern Western, because we're so old. I'm so old, but
so
like
old. God, we're old.
that's in terms of like Western era is not like the old for a few dollars more sort of era.
Sergio
but like that-
Leone and spaghetti
yeah,
western.
sort of that like 90s revival that happened. I think that these two are a really interesting compare and contrast of two very different styles, very different feels and tones and stories in the same genre.
You've been on a real Costner kick lately.
I'm always on the Costner kick.
Always on the Costner kick.
Always.
I was born on a Costner kick.
All right, throw these away. We're just going to talk about The Postman for the next hour.
And Waterworld.
Yeah.
So for mine, I'm going with Boots Riley's movie from last year, Sorry to Bother You. That was one that I really wished would have gotten more love. It's so... The way that he does his camera work and the way that they did the effects and real practical use of stuff was great. It's a great story. It's out there and it's wonderful and it's super funny. And it was one of my favorite movies of last year.
Yeah, no, I've said it when I finally saw it. I watched it on a plane, which was great, just because every now and then someone would look over
Yep.
and there would just, I don't want to spoil the movie, but
Wow.
there would just be something very weird on screen
Very
and out of
weird.
context. It was just like, what in the hell is he watching? I wish so much that I had seen this movie when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. Which will segue us a little later into another question. But yeah, I envy like kids that are like just seeing the stuff that's really going to impact them creatively
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
now, and I envy the kids who saw this like at the right age, where like a movie like that is going to shape like how they think and how they
Yeah.
create. Like, such a cool movie. Yeah.
Would you like to take it, sir?
I concur. Like the kids that get to see stuff now, like the kids who grew up with Jordan Peele as like a role model.
Yeah.
I just want
pretty rad.
to kick him in the chest, Sparta style. Like I have none of that. I had none of that. I was gonna do dry, sad documentaries about sad black stuff, or maybe be able to direct Carl Weathers in an action movie or something. Those are my aspirations.
Your options.
Those were my aspirations at the time.
Those are the roads.
Right. Maybe I'll get to direct Chuck Norris in a Walker Texas Ranger episode. But for real, that's obviously overstating things. But obviously,
Poor kid Ed.
kid
Bill
Ed.
Clinton was going to be your blackest president.
dude, right? He plays saxophone. Hack.
Arsenio.
So you know what I mean. So like that was really cool. But we're gonna get to my pick.
Yep.
My pick is from 1995. It's called La Haine or Hate. It is a really great movie. It stars Vin, Saeed, and Hubert. And basically, these are three dudes, and they basically see that gun in Vin's hands. Basically, a cop loses his gun in a riot that comes about out of a young Arab kid who is beat up. And so the city is on fire, about to boil over like a kettle, and these three kids, one of which has a gun, are wandering the streets, no school, no nothing, because everything's all messed up. And it's about their day. And in the best way, it's just one of those, imagine Before Sunset with stakes. You know what I mean? It's that compacted time, but these kids are wandering, and the danger in this one kid's pocket, it's growing every minute.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it has a lot of slice of life little scenes in it, but there's always the weight of this gun and the weight of the people who are coming after them. And so, it's a really nice slice of life that really tells a story that I don't think we haven't grown past this movie. The movie came out in 1995, and I know American teenagers right now could watch this movie and relate to every single thing that's been said, from over policing to sort of a riotous, everybody protesting atmosphere in the air, a zeitgeist of the new wokeness bumping up against the old guard and all this jazz. It's right there.
Right on.
That's
So,
great.
yeah.
I love me a teenage, like in the day of Dazed and Confused. I love those kind of movies.
Yep.
I don't know what it is. Like I've always, I think it is because with those movies where it's all of these things happening in one day, you get to know the characters so much because you are getting to see them reacting to different things.
Yep.
And it can be kind of fun because one way to make it happen is it's almost like different sketches, if that makes sense. So just like different, because you have to keep it, going for one day, you have to make things happen. So I think that's great. I haven't seen that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hadn't either.
it's for real really good, and it's one of the few movies that I've seen where like subtitles they don't really get in the way. They got a nice style of the subtitles on the one that I watched, and it's just like you get involved in it, and it's paced very well, so you can take in the dialogue, and there's not even that much dialogue, frankly, and the dialogue that is there, you can just watch the actors act, and you'd be like, oh yeah, Hubert is really mad about that. You don't really have to. So I think it's a triumph of filmmaking. I think Jodie Foster brought it to Cannes or something like that. Like she was like on it at the time.
Right.
One of her earliest forays into being a producer and a distributor of films.
We gotta watch Lahame at Cannes.
So cold. It's such a cold movie. It's cold-blooded. Anyway, yeah, it's a good movie, Lahane.
Right on. Thank you. Eric?
So I've got two, but one I'll talk about more, which is like Danielle, a movie from just last year, but Thoroughbreds. I really liked last year. I thought it was kind of a sadly underseen. There were some people who brought up Heathers in comparison, which I understand. Heathers is one of my all-time favorite movies because it does involve affluent teenage girls and murder. But it's a very interesting story about these two girls who have a weird history, kind of learn more about as the film progresses, but one of them has a stepfather she hates and them plotting to potentially murder him. But it's made by I'm forgetting the guy's name, and I feel really bad about that. But it was made by a playwright, and it was his first time as making a feature film. I was really impressed cinematically because on one hand, it's very small scale, and you're like, yeah, I can see this as a stage play for sure. But cinematically, I think he does some really interesting stuff. Really interesting use of sound in this movie. These two characters, it's Olivia Cooke and Anya Joy-Taylor. Am I putting her? I always know. Is it Taylor Joy or Joy Taylor? But anyway,
No one probably knows.
they're both terrific in this movie. It's really kind of this sort of war of wills between them, and Olivia Cooke plays this sort of almost like Dexter when she's introduced, because it's like, oh, she has no emotion. She's like has to fake emotions kind of to get through life. But we really unwrap these characters as it goes on. Really love that film. Anthony Elchin, it was the final film he filmed, unfortunately, before his tragic death. But he's wonderful in it in a comedic sort of side role. So really dig that movie. And then I'll just mention quicker, but The Sweet Hereafter, which is the Adam McGowan movie from 1997 with Ian Holm and Sarah Polley. It's one of my favorite sad movies. It's about the aftermath, a small Canadian town dealing with the aftermath of a horrific bus accident. It sounds really fun, guys. That killed a bunch of school kids.
Wow.
But it's
Dude, I saw that movie.
but
I concur.
But it's about a lawsuit, like the parents wanting to do sort of this lawsuit against, who can they blame for this? And it's a very interesting movie with a lot going on with the kind of what you learn about this town and these characters. So.
I get that reference.
Film Club, assemble. We hooked you up. Liam, I feel like these pair well together. Liam asked a 3-parter, which is technically cheating, Liam.
It's a lot, Liam.
But we're feeling good today.
That look on Daniel's face.
Liam.
Why are
So
you
Liam
on that?
asked, what images? This deserves the startup that he gave it. Because thank you,
Yes.
Liam. I have personally been looking back on my own life for these questions, and because I respect and admire all of you at Screen Junkies, I wanted to bring these questions to all of you. I hope your introspection is going well and that it's positive. What images from films do you remember resonating with you the most from your childhood? So not just movies, but like specific like.
Images.
Yeah. For me, hi, I'm broken. The Garbage Pail Kids.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I still hate it. I still can't watch it.
I close my eyes and there they are. The Garbage Pail Kids probably leads the list for me.
I can't watch it.
You don't remember the Garbage Pail Kids? Those little Uzi
They're
Puss,
in-
little
man, they're like-
Uncanny Valley little bastards.
They're
Yeah.
in cages at one point.
Yeah.
They filmed parts of that movie. The big thing for me with that
Upsetting.
movie is they filmed parts of it at the Sherman Oaks Park that I grew up going to all the time. So I was very excited. Like Mackenzie Aston gets thrown into crap at the Sherman Oaks Park. It's
Yeah.
like, I walked right by there.
That nightmare happened close to me. Woo!
Oh, God.
One for me, and this is, I know this movie is not
Garbage
great.
Pail Kids.
I hate you. In Supergirl, there is this. I don't remember if it was only director's cut or what. I remember seeing it when I was a kid. They called it like the flight ballet or the whatever. And so there's this really beautiful moment where she's just got to Earth, just discovering her powers, and she's like in this field, and she's flying, and it looked so realistic. And she's like doing all these flips and stuff, and like I know how they made it now, but as a kid that was one of those like the wonders of movies. Like holy crap, this girl's like actually flying, and it wasn't like that bad green screen or any of that stuff. Like you could really see her moving. So that one is one that's always kind of stuck with me, and I don't know why.
Nice.
It's weird.
Oh, I guess I'm a weirdo. When I was a kid, when we were all kids, there was way more quicksand than anybody would ever.
Man, where did all this quicksand come from?
Right, there
I feel
was-
like I've never heard it referenced since I was like 11.
Yeah, there was so much quicksand when I was a kid.
Like
it seemed
actual
like a big,
quicksand.
But it seemed like that was going to be a big problem when I was going to be
Oh, I see what
a
you're
grown
saying.
up.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean? Like, because there were
yeah.
so many. Like, because we were, you know what it was? 70s. In the 70s, quicksand was huge, and 70s syndicated television is what kids of our age
Yeah.
were watching. So they kept recycling the fear of
And then
quicksand.
cartoons too.
Right, and cartoons were super.
It did
big.
make it seem like it was everywhere.
Yeah, but also in that vein, mud. So like the scene in the
the band
Predator,
Mud.
the scene in the Predator where homeboy covers himself in mud to evade the scanner of the Predator.
Yep.
Right.
It stuck with me for literally ever. Like, and also similarly when Rambo in First Blood Part 2 covers himself in mud and his eye opens and he pops out and he
Yes. Yeah.
grabs the Russian
Yep.
soldier. It's like, dude. For some reason, I'm like, that's my version of revenge. Super cold revenge where I gotta hide for hours and then pounce. Like for some reason that got in my head as like cool, or like being able to hide in that respect would be cool. But I never wanted to be invisible because that's for weirdos.
Wow. Strong wants there.
Strong invisible feels.
When I really think about it, I actually have to go with Empire Strikes Back and the image of... I know, right? And the image of Darth Vader standing in silhouette in the carbon freezing chamber when Luke walks in.
Yeah.
Standing up there on the platform.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just think back and it was just like, it was so cool looking and minimalist if you really think back. If you look at that carbon freezing chamber, it was actually super minimalist. It was like a platform and some mechanical stuff, but the background's almost nothing.
Yeah.
And it's just lit really cool. And so just to have Darth Vader, who was obviously already an iconic villain, but just to have the silhouette standing there, and it's very eerie. I don't know. Yeah, really, I had a trading card that had an image of that specifically.
Yeah.
And I think I like stared at it all the time. I was like, this is cool.
My one from that movie is when the dude Lendo's like, come into my living room. We're going to have some tea or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he opens the door and Darth Vader's just chilling.
Vader just
Yes,
and then
hanging out.
he's like
Yeah,
whipping
yeah.
out the gas and he's like, please, with your bolts. I stopped it with my hand, please. Now come on, let's sit down.
Yeah. Well, even just
that is in
visually,
my head.
It's so cool because it's like this,
Him in a dining room.
It doesn't. It feels so wrong, and that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah,
It's
it's,
like-
Yeah.
it's all white and like it's in the clouds and it's heavenly and yeah, and just like having just like the all black armor contrasted in that at the end of a banquet table.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I've seen
right.
people
Super
joke,
cool.
of course, about what do you imagine the small talk was like between Vader and Boba Fett before they came in. So you got anything else lined up after that?
Cool.
Well, you know,
Right, any other missions?
sometimes my navigation doesn't go right, and it causes me to fly into holes.
What's Jabba really like?
So who am I sending this invoice to? Am I?
He's like, no, it's just this one button just turns it all off. Yeah, and it's huge.
I do have a speaker here.
You just have to push it.
Is it Empire
ridiculous.
LLC or is it?
We just went with a new accounting firm.
So, part 2 of Liam's 3-parter. What motivated you in your teenage years to pursue a deeper understanding about movies? So I'm going to deviate this one a little bit for myself because for me, I came to this job like a little differently than say like a Dan who like that's his thing. Like I've always been like a comedy writer and a comedian, and that's sort of how I ended up here. So I'm going to say. Obviously, I grew up with like Monty Python and all that stuff, but I think the thing that I saw for the first time that made me go, oh, like that I could see myself on screen and how I felt was The State on MTV.
Yes.
The sketch comedy group The State. They were just like, yeah, oh, they were just so cool. Like that the theme song just felt like rebellious and like anarchist and like grunge in like the best way, and the stuff was so weird. Like they closed out their show with like a big middle finger by like using the remaining budget on a musical about a racetrack where you race porcupines. Like so that was one of the first times where I was like really starting to recognize like not just that something was funny, but also why it was making me laugh. And I was really starting to recognize like, oh, I'm starting to see like games and patterns and stuff like that within sketches and like the rules and obviously, they weren't the first to do it, but they were the first for me to do it. Watching characters and sketches bleed into one another and show up in other places. Obviously
Callbacks of Hoyt.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously Mr. Show and stuff like that really specialized in that kind of thing and like weaving a narrative through sketches. But like this was one of the first times where it was like, hey, it's another Captain Monterey Jack sketch, but oh, Doug's in it, stuff like that. So that was one of the first times I was like, oh, I think I can actually do this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. That was also just such a good time for sketch comedy because there's even like the Roundhouse, which was when I was super into.
The Roundhouse.
Do you remember Roundhouse?
Yeah.
Another one
The
where
Roundhouse.
we'll have a celebration, and that was one that was on Nick, and it felt slightly more adult than everything else on Nick, and it was just really good, and the writing
This
was
is like pre all that.
This is pre all that, and then there's obviously Kids in the Hall. So yeah, a lot of really good, alternative Grinchy sketch stuff.
Actually,
Yeah.
I liked Ben Stiller's show. I don't know if you guys have ever seen
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I think was actually the big thing that really stuck out to me about Ben Stiller's show was like he was so into like precisely recreating the movies he was parodying. It's like, oh, if we're gonna do a movie trailer parody, we're gonna try to get the guy who does the voiceover of the actual trailer.
we're actually gonna try to
and
get
it will
Fontaine
like
and-
the shots, and I really appreciated that. Like it was like, I'm going to deconstruct this thing, but it will look exactly right. Like
Yeah.
it was next
Yeah.
level from SNL where it was like it could look cheap, but this was like no,
Yeah.
it will-
All right.
very meticulous.
Well, I think I'm a basic BI. So of a certain time frame, when I was a young teenager, I saw Pulp Fiction, and I gotta say, it was one of the, no matter what you think about Quentin and his foot fetish and all the stuff, he uses this word, he uses that word, whatever. The thing is, at that time, it was one of the only pieces of art that let me know that people made these things. Because I knew when I saw that thing that wasn't made by a committee. There wasn't a bunch of people who make ketchup and bombs and going, yeah, this should be right here, and the story structure is da-da-da-da. Nah, some weirdo got other weirdos, it turns out, to give him money to go do this weird thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that all struck me like a ton of bricks. It was not a corporation that made this. I knew that
Yeah,
in my
it didn't feel like a
bones.
studio film. It didn't feel like
Yeah, so like that attracted me. So I looked at the screenplay of that, and I looked at the screenplay of like a lot of those '90s movies. I went to a comic book convention about the screenplay to The Crow, Indiana Jones, Pulp Fiction, Casino, and like another movie. Like one of the Bonds. I think the 007 joint with Michelle Yeoh in it.
Tomorrow Never Dies.
Tomorrow Never Dies. I bought all those scripts all in one big go. So I was like, studio stuff that's been around forever, new age stuff, this, that. Oh, and the screenplay to Last Boy Scout, and the screenplay to Long Kiss Goodnight. So I went on a Shane Black thing, all this thing. It showed me that these are all the different ways to do it, and Pulp Fiction still stood out amongst those scripts even. So it was a big deal to me, and I always thought, and this is going to ruffle some feathers, but I always respected Quentin Tarantino for sometimes doing dialogue of some people when they're in private. The way that some people talk when they're in private, and some of the words they use when they're in private, and even when they have a little power over you. Like, let's say you got a Bonnie situation, and you go to somebody's house, and they get to say this word over and over to you because they know they got you over a barrel. I've experienced those things in small town Missouri when I'm 14 years old. I've quite experienced some of those things where people got you over a barrel, can't do nothing about it, but you're going to fight all of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, what, you going to reduce yourself to an animal over a word? You know what I mean? These are being explored in a little action movie made of a crime movie made of little vignettes with little nice needle drops and feet and stuff. You know what I mean? So like it was a triumph of art to me.
You're really upset about the feet.
It was just a triumph of art to me.
You know what's interesting too is that it's like because I know a response you can have a lot of time from when you do a panel discussion like this, where it's like, here's one example of a thing. Like a lot of the instant response is like, how could you not have said this, over Pulp Fiction or something like that. But I think something interesting about art, and especially movies, is that even if you've seen it, you've seen the movies, like you've seen Shane Black movies already, you saw the Lethal Weapons, you saw this, you saw that, but there's that one, like you saw Pulp Fiction, and even though you had seen like the elements and the themes and the things that like it's Pulp Fiction spoke to you in, like they were there, they were in your head, just for whatever reason they hadn't like stood out to you yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's always interesting, that one movie that makes you open your eyes and not just see like things moving forward in a different way, but you look backwards and you're like, oh, holy crap, like this stuff has always been around.
And you start to notice things that start movements. Like there's a real intrinsic, to me, lineage between Pulp Fiction and something like John Wick. They're both these hip hop remixes of all of these different tropes of the throwing that old fighter doesn't lose the fight record. Throwing that old I got a price on my head. Throwing that record, and they're just switching these records of all these tropes. And it's the same. What do we use? Gold coins. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's all that happening, and I love that. For me, Tarantino was the one who brought that sort of remixing to the table, and now other people have. Sometimes a copy of a copy is a bad thing. That's true.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sometimes you run out of toner.
Yeah.
Get that.
So yeah, I really like this question because I had to think a little bit about, I was so into movies as young as I can remember, and I would just watch them over and over again. But the motivated me to pursue a deeper understanding, I think, two things. I was Fangoria magazine because I was a huge horror fan, and so Fangoria just, it talks about horror movies and Freddy's on the cover, great. But then it actually was really interesting articles about like the makeup effects guys and stuff that you just weren't seeing a lot, like how they actually did it. How did they make that animatronic Freddy Snake and all this stuff? And I thought that was really interesting. And then the other thing is I was so geeky as a kid that I was reading like Variety when I was in like 9th grade, because I found out that on Fridays they would list what movies were being made. And at the time, again, without, when there wasn't a million websites to tell you everything that was happening.
No, it's just one, us.
Yeah, right.
Literally, this is the only
just us. But at the time, it was like, that stuff just wasn't that prevalent. Like, here's what's in the pipeline, here's what sequels are being made. But if you picked up Variety, you could read the list of movies that were in production or in pre-production, and I'd be like, oh, they're making this, and I'd circle things I was interested in. And so, Fangoria and Variety, which aren't often mentioned in the same breath, but they kind of approach filmmaking from two very different sides of things, and did make me interested in just how the sausage is made and kind of figuring out all those different aspects to it.
Right on.
That's great. For me, it's a little weird and might be all over the place. So I talked about this before. I grew up military, so I moved around a lot. And so luckily, I would go to a lot of schools where there were other military kids, and we would all kind of glom onto each other. But you always wind up moving in the summer, which means you don't wind up meeting anybody until the fall. And so I wound up getting into a lot of movies, and that was just kind of always my thing. And much like Eric, I got into it because if I really liked a movie, the first thing I would do is see if anybody had done like a behind the scenes or
Right.
any of that stuff. I've always wanted to know how the sausage was made. That's always been fascinating to me. Watching interviews with people talking about their process and seeing all the cameras move, an early memory. And again, this is one I go to the well to, but it's true. Is after watching the Mortal Kombat movie, I became obsessed with this making of Mortal Kombat special that they did that was just on regular prime time. And so then that became something that I would always hunt down. And then when DVDs became big, the first things that I would do is make sure that I watch all of the makings of
Yeah.
and the behind the
Commentaries.
scenes,
Yeah.
commentaries, all that
Yeah.
stuff. I would buy books about it, if it, like any of the glossy ones where they would show like the directors and everything. And I didn't even realize that that was what I was doing. Like I don't know that I necessarily predicted that I would end up exactly here, but I've always kind of been interested in the process of making these things. And now I realize it's because I want to be involved in that process in some way.
Yeah. Who knew? Mortal Kombat.
Always, man. Always back to Mortal Kombat.
But that's the thing.
But this
it's-
rap right
Yeah,
here.
and I was gonna say you're just giving me memories of because I get those making up books too, and it's like I bet there's about a lot of the same pictures we can think of, like Tim Burton in that kind of beret-looking hat, and on the set of a Batman movie and stuff like that.
There was always at least a handful of the trading cards that would come out with movies like that, where there was like a behind-the-scenes shot.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, where it would be like Tim Burton, standing next to Keaton in the
Right,
costume, like
right.
pointing at something, and you're like,
Well, he's directing right there.
Yeah.
oh, that's what directing is. It's pointing.
That's right.
Yep.
Do that.
doing this and pointing.
So then, Liam asks, and this is fitting as we're driving down to the madness that is San Diego Comic-Con. When in your adult lives did you decide to pursue careers diving into the entertainment industry as a whole? So, like, was there that weird moment where you were like, I will become a bat, or
I mean,
because I feel like everyone at the table like had that some level of like, yeah, sure, that's what I like, but like.
Superstitious lot.
I mean, and I've been performing all of my life. Like I was in choirs, and I studied. I'm a classically trained singer. I'm lettered in choir and in drama, which is something I think most people didn't know you could do, which I didn't really either. And I, president of the drama club, blah blah blah. Went to a performing arts arts conservatory college. That didn't work out super well, and then started doing stand up comedy. So it's like I don't know if there ever was a time when I wasn't interested in performing because I started
Right.
performing very young. So, and then that's what led me to, especially doing stand-up comedy, where it's like, oh, I don't need anyone else for this. It's just like all I need is me, and like I do all my own writing, and I do all my own directing, and I do all my own everything. It's not like when you have a band, or it's not like when you have to worry about your vocal teacher's schedule or anything. Like I can just go and do this thing. And so I don't know. Yeah, for me, there was never not a time when I wasn't at least performing or doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, my path was pretty set for me. I mean, look, as a film obsessed geeky kid
Growing up in the valley.
growing up in the valley, with much thicker glasses than this and some weight on me. Guess what? Little Ebert, you love movies and talk about movies. Little Ebert. But the thing is that
That's so cute. That's so cute.
yeah, that was mostly my older brother. But but yeah, I didn't know exactly
Eric's
what.
like, yeah, cute. It was cute.
Yeah. David Goldman. Anyway, but I didn't know exactly what that entailed, and the one thing about the explosion of the internet and all these sites is at the time it was harder to picture yourself as an entertainment journalist because it just wasn't
Right.
that many. I mean, Ebert was probably, you'd think of Siskel and Ebert because they were two of the only ones that were kind of out there
Van Malton
doing that.
it's a
Yeah,
very small handful.
So that didn't seem realistic. So I was a film major because I thought I want to be involved in movies, and I'll be a producer. But then that wasn't really what I wanted to do, and I had to kind of figure that out and do some PA jobs and see that side of it and be like, I don't think I really want to be a producer. And but then kind of figuring out and then being at the right place, right time, because it's like, oh, you can start reviewing movies on these websites that there are a lot more of now all of a sudden, and you can start writing about things, and maybe they'll send you on a set visit. So it kind of just filtered into that. The fact that I would do something involved in it seemed kind of obvious, but yeah, sitting at this desk,
Sure.
it was a bunch of different things coming together.
Well, that's always sort of an interesting moment where you enter a field and you do kind of feel like you're like, oh, well, I've been prepping for this forever. You sort of mentioned it like having the conservatory experience, and you mentioned it sort of like I was going on sets and realizing like, oh, wait, no, you know what? This might not be exactly,
right.
like the way I wanted to go.
Yeah.
That's always an interesting moment where it's like you're, and a hard one sometimes, like sort of being like, I'm going to be a producer. Am I now failing at wanting to be a producer because like I'm realizing I don't want to be a producer like
And that's how I spent my 20s in retail.
right yeah. You know, it's like it takes time to like figure that stuff out
Yeah.
because I came in like being like, oh, I'm gonna be an actor, and I'm a shitty actor. I'm really bad at it, and I was and you know, you just sort of you hit that weird reset button where it's like, you know what, it's okay if I stop going to auditions to try to sell yogurt and phones.
Turns out that you're very good at being Joe Star.
Yes, which not the most marketable thing in the world, but
It turns out there's already one, and he's doing it. So.
We've got that role.
he's in New York and he's fine. And there's a French one.
And there's the French rapper. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's pretty big.
No, I think for me it was like a. You know what? It was I went to college because it was always something I liked to do, and I liked comedy and stuff like that. But you never go. Well, all of you apparently did, but I at no point was like, that's what I'm gonna go do. So like I went to college and was like, I was gonna be a double major in religious studies and English, and then I started dabbling in the theater department because that's where I started making my like first friends. And I saw a production of Winter's Tale that was so cool, and it was like. It was just this weird, stark, black and white minimalist set, and like the whole ensemble was on stage the whole time, and they just lit each other with like flashlights and lanterns, and it was so creepy and atmospheric. And there's a couple people you can see on TV were on it. Derek Wilson, who's plays the weird commando guy from the future on Hulu's Future Man, was Autolycus, and he was in it, and like. Just scared the hell out of me, you know, in that role because he was just this weird, like omnipotent thing walking around during scenes, and I walked out of that and was like, I want to do that. And then my parents got the dreaded call.
Guess who's changing their name?
Religion, not so much.
Yeah.
Rather ruin my life.
It's gonna be great.
Well, I recently put up this tweet, and it's like this little kid, and he's trying to like get out of this maze, and like he thinks he gets a lot of confidence because he's in a house mirrors. He gets a lot of confidence and starts running really fast, and he hits a wall and falls on the ground. And I put me trying to impress my mom. And it's super real though. Because like when your mom wants you to be something practical,
Yeah.
because her brother was something impractical, i.e. bad, and you know your dad is something practical but who sucks and is mean, and then you got this one baby kid and he's gonna go do something great. You got a grown up and you go do something great, and I go, I don't want to be great. I don't like college is trash, man. And I go to college and it doesn't really work out. And, you know, I kind of go back and help her out a little bit, you know, with some stuff. And, you know, you find yourself a security guard at a library in your 20s, and you find yourself basically absconding for long periods of time with all these film books and all this stuff, and you find yourself going to comic book conventions, and all of a sudden you're buying scripts all the time, and you're building this whole thing in your head of like, okay, you could be a screenwriter, and then you like you try to send out screenplays and stuff, but it's all slow, when you're just a bum from Missouri, so half these things don't even get open, they're in a slush pile, yada yada. The query letter days, you know.
Yeah.
And I started going to film festivals and learning that your personality is 100 times better than any query letter. And I go to, I'm 20 years old and I go to Austin Film Festival and I'm up in ladies' hotel rooms, nothing untoward, but they trust me so much because I'm such a good little guy. And we're having such a great conversation about film from 1940 all the way up to now. And it's just like, wow, these are your people. They like you. But then you go back to Missouri and it's months and months and months before you ever talk to anybody like that again. And you feel like, am I weird?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You gotta find those people.
And then at the library, long story boring, I met a couple cats at the library, and they were in part of a like film coalition thing, and they got up the gumption to move out here. And shortly after I quit the library, I got this telemarketer job. Well, really quickly, I made like $20,000 free and clear.
Damn.
Like I was straight hooping as far as like on the telemarketing thing.
You were sorry to bother you.
Yeah, no, for real.
Yeah.
That's why. I mean, for the longest time, I wanted to make a movie. What do you think?
We all have a white voice.
Yeah. It's yeah. That's the only
Mine's
thing.
ridiculous.
No, the thing that started to bother you was everybody has a code switch / white voice, every African American, but when you get to the pro level, though, he was super pro level. You know, we all got a little crossover, but that dude could wow. Yeah. So that's why he succeeded so much, whatever. But the bottom line is, I came out here with a lot of money for myself at that time, and I just sort of wallowed in how sad I was that I was here with everybody, but I wasn't really. I was on the outskirts of Hollywood and blah blah. And you start doing comedy like Danielle said.
And that first year is so hard.
Right, it's a culture shock, this and that. So yeah, and I started doing comedy, and it was such immediate. And rather than sitting a script and then getting back some notes about how much it sucked, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 4 months, 8 months later. Audience goes ha 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 right there.
Yeah, they either laugh or they don't laugh.
Yeah, and it was just and then I started palling around with some bums like Joe Starr and our buddy Tom Frank and stuff, and we start doing comic book conventions together and become good friends. And next thing you know, you're sitting at a desk with people way smarter than you, hoping not to embarrass yourself every Monday and Wednesday, and it's great.
But so I think it's I don't know. I'm trying to figure out some big sum up lesson to wrap all those.
I think I got one.
I
got one. Check it out. You don't know in the moment that you're preparing for the dopeness that will be you in the future. Yeah. You have no idea. Some real Slumdog Millionaire stuff. All those trying times when he learned that this train goes this way and this happens at that time and this person does this and da-da-da-da. He learned all those facts. He was under extreme duress, was he not? That's our lives. We're under this weird duress all the time, and we can't see the lessons that we're learning from all the things that we go through. But in the end, in the aggregate, it all piles up and on this knowledge in your mind, which makes you a great reviewer, which makes you a superstar across a bunch of platforms because you know about so many different sorts of things. And me as a nerd comic, I just sat around being a jerk about everything.
Hell yeah.
And then you learn how to be succinct and get it out there. Yeah. So, we've all learned over the course of time how to be what we are and how to play this unique instrument. Yeah. And we wouldn't have learned that if we didn't go through all that stuff before.
Well, everybody does the dumb story about, you always see it passed around on Twitter every few months where it's think you're too old. Stan Lee didn't invent the X-Men until he was 104. Right. All that stuff. Rest in peace, sir. But it's it's true. You're not... no one knows anything until they jump in and realize that they don't know anything and start learning things. It's all, like you said, Ed, much better than I am. It's all work in progress. It's all just sort of pieces sort of.
It's not like a movie. The music isn't going to swell when you find out the fact that's going to save you in the third act.
No.
The music doesn't swell. The camera, there's nobody dollies in on you. You don't go, oh, that doesn't happen. But it does, though. You know what I mean? So we were all really blessed to have gone through all that stuff, frankly, because none of us would be who we are if we had had slightly easier paths, slightly different paths.
My crappy PA jobs, which involved some really shady things on the parts of people I worked with, they both informed stuff later on as far as just knowledge of the film industry, you know, and then and give me some good stories to tell. But no, it is true. It's then I was sort of, I pushed aside what I was going to do for a few years, but definitely I'm glad I did all those things and did those crappy jobs to kind of learn more stuff that I could use later in an actual productive way.
Yeah. Keep going. Keep pushing. Keep going. Keep making things. I think that's a good spot to end our show.
Can I mention before we go? I was like, should I address Macho Man?
You should.
Okay, just Macho Man, because we're going to Comic-Con and Mattel sent a bunch of Comic-Con. Oh, here, that's my camera. They sent a bunch of stuff, but I just love that this exists. We live in an era where an 80s and 90s wrestler,
very specific, Randy
and the
Savage
commercial
look.
campaign he did for a product, in this case Slim Jim, is made in toy form, has a Comic-Con exclusive. So yeah, thanks Mattel, because this is amazing and weird.
You gotta have beef and you gotta have spice.
Need a little excitement.
Hey guys, snap into your Wednesday.
Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow at Comic-Con.